Hey everybody, this is Laravel DFW for April 2015. I'm Tanner Hearn, and so we have some great people in today. If you're watching online, you can ask a question at laraveldfw.com/ask, and that'll go into a queue. We already have a couple, so post them up, laraveldfw.com/ask. Feel free to tweet at us as well. It's at LaravelDFW on Twitter. So we have Stuart Yamartino. Is that how you say it, Yamartino? You there, Stuart?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, cool. We've been having a little bit of
Yeah,
a delay with Hangouts today, so it'll be fine once the presentation starts. But
yeah.
hmm
Okay.
So really quick, why don't we go around really fast and kind of say who's in here and kind of what you do really quick, and then we can just jump right into your presentation. So I'm Tanner Hearn. I'm the director of product at MusicBed. We do a ton with Laravel. We use it all the time. We have a lot of cool people that work with us too that know Laravel as well. So yeah, it's great. I guess Stuart will end with you, and then you can kind of go right into your presentation. So Oswaldo, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Osvaldo Brignoni. I work at Salmon Trading Company, which they sell jewelry. So my responsibility is the e-commerce web store, and I'm the only developer there.
And you're building on Laravel, right?
Yes.
Very cool. Danny, what's up with you?
Hey guys, my name is Danny. I work at MusicBed as well, junior software engineer, back-end stuff. I mainly deal with Laravel. That's pretty much it. Use some Laravel 4, and over the last month I've been doing a lot of Laravel 5. So that's fun as well. That's all I got.
Very cool. Nathan, can you hear us? We haven't checked your mic yet, but it might be off. Well, it's okay. So, Stuart, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Stuart Yamartino, and I am a student at Miami University in Ohio, not Florida. And yeah, I've been using Laravel just on the side, but also in some of school projects I've been working on. And yeah, that's about me. But can you hear me well enough?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was just checking because our internet can be sketchy
Well,
at
cool.
best.
So before we start, just again, ask questions at laraveldfw.com/ask, and then yeah, just let us know. So Stuart, I guess tell us what your talk is, and then I guess go straight into it, man. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so this talk is called Laravel 5 in Action because we all have seen, all the different features of Laravel 5 that have come out. Not necessarily all of us have been able to build a fresh Laravel 5 application, and I kind of wanted to build a Laravel 5 application and use some of the new features in Laravel 5 and kind of show how they can be used in maybe unique ways or just standard ways, and then kind of just have a conversation around that. So I'd love for this to be kind of a conversation, so if anyone has questions in here, just stop me at any point, and we can talk about whatever.
Sure.
So I built a web application called Code Stylus for this talk, and what it is basically a site for displaying code style guides. So like the PSRs, for example, are code styles, and kind of the hope is it might not be useful, but I kind of built it in hope that it could be used for open source projects, and they can basically just throw up these like markdown files on here that have a style guide for the open source project, so that people that contribute it follow the style guides for writing code. So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see that?
Give it a second here. Okay, I can see it.
Okay, cool. So this is actually what the domain will be, but I'm just doing local DNS for this right now. So yeah, here's this is just my Twitter and GitHub username, whatnot. But yeah, so like as an example of what this could be like, this is the PHP Fig, and this is PSR2, which goes over code style. So you know things like should we be using tabs or spaces or 2 spaces or 4 spaces, or should the curly braces go under the class or next to the class, and stuff like that. So I guess I'll just give you a quick tour of the application, and then I can show you kind of how I built it using some of the new Laravel 5 features. So if I just go here /login, this uses GitHub authentication through Socialite in Laravel 5. So we go here. This connects with GitHub. We authorize the application. And then what this does is create an account for us using our GitHub username and all that automatically for us. So here I can just click Create New Guide. And then, so basically, so you can create a slug for your guide, and it'd be something like this, codestylus.com/slug title. So I could do Laravel DFW. They've done this before, and then Laravel DFW. This is just example markdown, but we'll just use this for now. You can just preview it. But one unique thing that I kind of did with this is anytime you use a header, it'll actually create a side navigation for that, which you can jump to, and I'll show you that in a second. So when I create the guide, that brings me to the page. So here's the style guide I just created. This is the markdown file. Here's the side navigation that was generated from these headers, title, and then the page. So essentially you could share this with anyone. You could have this in a README on your GitHub project or anything like that, and it would basically just link people to this public page. But let me show you. Let's do an example with the PSR. So let's do PSR2 and then PHP PSR2. And I actually wrote a markdown file for this and paste that in there. So this is about half of PSR2 just markdown. And so what I can also do is create a private style guide. And what this does is no one can see this publicly, but you can share it with users on GitHub using their username. And I was thinking this might be useful for, say, a company or something that was having an internal style guide that they wanted to keep private. So now when I create this guide, it does the same thing. You know, it creates this left navigation where you can jump to any of your headers, and that's basically it for this part of it. Obviously, I just wanted to make it accessible, so you know, just making these so that anyone can be using them wherever they are. So let's check out. Let's reload this.
Your Chrome extension's not happy.
Yeah. So here you can see this one's a private one and this one's public. So here I can do add user access, and this I can add GitHub usernames that are basically whitelisted for this style guide. So I can do Tanner. All your names will come up because I already wrote them in. Waldo. Thanks. Color. This is secretly me just giving shout outs to all my friends. And then, you can just click and delete them pretty easily. So that's basically the extent of the application itself. Now, I guess I can show you kind of some of the things I use to make this. So let me check here on my notes. So I guess let's take a look first at Socialite. So are you guys able to read this?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go to routes. So here I have the 3 basic routes of authenticating with GitHub. I have a login, a verify, and a logout. And logout basically just kills the session. So login goes to the GitHub controller at login. And so go to the GitHub controller. This is basically this basically just does nothing but point to I have a GitHub handler class, and that's basically where everything happens. So the login, first when you do /login, it calls this method, and I call on the GitHub handler redirect to provider. And so in the GitHub handler, you can see we do redirect to provider, and basically this is all you need with Socialite, which I think is really nice. Basically, you just do Socialite. I mean, you can read it Socialite with, and then the provider you're using, and then redirect. And this is essentially what redirects the user to the GitHub website itself, where then they give access to your application. And then basically on the GitHub side, you have a callback URL, which I set to codestylus.com/verify, which then comes through to here, and then you just call Socialite with GitHub, and this gets the user. And so between this line and this line, this is all you need to do for handling GitHub authentication with Socialite. I was a little it's a very, very light thing, which is really good, and just does OAuth, but there's a lot more to actually engaging with, say, like creating an account. So basically what I do here is I just create a user account in the database using their information from GitHub. So I say, if this user exists, basically, or if this user doesn't exist, create a new user, else take the user, and you basically, I create a new session, which I just set here with a session. I create a remember token, and then I set a remember token in the database, and I basically just use the Laravel authentication code for that. I mean, it's very simple. I was just kind of looked up how it was done in the inner workings of Laravel. So that's basically it for Socialite. It gives you a whole object of all the information. So username, profile, a lot of information, and basically I can use that to automatically create their username on my site and allow you to link their profiles, which I haven't really incorporated into this, to their GitHub profiles.
So Stuart,
let me check.
Whenever you give access to other people, is it comparing it against your usernames, or is it comparing against any sort of GitHub thing?
Sorry, say that again. I think it broke up a little bit.
Whenever you're comparing usernames for authentication to see a private code style, is it comparing the usernames that are inside of your database?
Yeah, it actually doesn't compare anything at all when you create those. You actually just set that, and even if the user isn't logged in with GitHub yet, I could just do Tanner Hearn, and then I could say, hey, I give you access, and then you can sign in, and then you'll be validated. But it doesn't do, it just basically stores the usernames, and then if it's there, then it allows you to see it. But if that user isn't logged in or anything, it doesn't change anything.
I guess I just mean if the user's logged into your system. So Tanner Hearn, like if there's a pre-existing user called, Blue24, and my username is Blue24 with GitHub, would that conflict?
Yeah. Well, it would only conflict if you changed so it uses your username from GitHub, so you'd have to change you'd have to change your username on GitHub and then authenticate or something. I'm not sure. It basically just uses whatever is stored in GitHub for your username and information. So
right. So whenever you log in, then it puts my username in your database, and then if I have
you can't enter your own username. It just takes what GitHub has for you.
Right. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's not like too much on Socialite. It's very simple. I think just figuring out how you want to use it to either create accounts or create sessions so that you can actually keep someone logged in with that. But it's kept very light, so you can kind of just use it for OAuth and figure out how you want to integrate it into your system. So I'm going to talk about middlewares real quick. So I think middlewares are interesting because they're a bit of a paradigm shift from filters, which are the default in Laravel 4. And one kind of difference that's kind of pointed out is that the request is actually passed through each middleware to the next middleware. And so, for example, I have this logged in with GitHub, and this middleware, what I do is I check. I say this session, I get the remember token, and then I say, check if that user exists, and logged in with that session basically. And if not, I redirect to login to log themselves in. Else, you always have this next request in your middlewares, and what this does is this goes to the next middleware, passing along the request. And it's interesting because you can use these middlewares in interesting ways because you can. I don't have a good example of this, but say maybe say you have an API and one of the post parameters is like JSON. I think Laravel automatically parses that into a PHP array, but if it didn't, you could basically set up this middleware to take the request and parse JSON into an array, or kind of do things where it's basically, it's exactly as it's called, middleware. This happens before entering your application layer. And you can also use, I guess it's not here, but you can use the URI as well as the post parameters as part of this request to modify them in different ways. So the three different middlewares that I made for this application are logged in with GitHub, and this checks if a user is logged in. And then guide owner, and this checks if the current user owns the guide that they're trying to access. So like for changing permissions and other things like that, I wrap it in this middleware to make sure that the user has access to that guide to edit it or do other things with it. And then I have check visibility, and this one is for checking private guides, and if they are private, if the user that's trying to access it has permission. So here I say, is the request coming in with the slug private? And then if it is, then I check if the user has permission. If not, then I essentially give a fail, and then else I just continue on to the next request. So those are nothing too crazy there with those, but we can see, so then basically to register these, use the kernel. So we can go in here and say the name for login with GitHub class should be aliased essentially to auth GitHub, and then visibility for check visibility, and then guide owner for guide owner. And then what these do are, these are the strings that you use for your routes. And so here I wrap all of this information with a middleware auth GitHub. So basically everything that sits inside of this group is, they're making sure that the user is logged in with GitHub. And then I also have another middleware here, which is nested, which basically checks that the guide owner, that the user is also the guide owner. So it's I'm a huge fan of route groups in general, because it makes this really easy way of nesting middlewares and kind of separating out, you know, this section of it. Everything inside of here has to go through authentication, and it's very visual for me. I know there was the route annotations, which were kind of released in Laravel 5, kind of as a separate project now. But
right.
I think the reason that I still like this way of doing it is because of route groups, and it just makes so easy. So I can say, you know, actually, I think that this, or I could say, actually, this group doesn't need to check if they're the owner. They just need to be logged in, and I can move it like that. And just moving around like that makes it so much easier to tinker with and figure out what works. So I guess that's it for middlewares. If anyone had any questions on those or anything, let me know. Okay, so let's go to the guide controller. So the guide controller is how I view, create, update, delete a guide, a style guide. So let me hold on, sorry. Okay, so here I'm using the new method injection in Laravel 5. And so what we can essentially do is, instead of, actually, we can just hide that. So instead of before, when you'd either use a facade, so you could use like a guide, oops, like that as a facade, or we would, you know, you could dependency inject them through the constructor, and then you'd have something like this, guide, and then you could, you know, you have your constructor up here or whatnot. The reason I really, really like this, because there are a few reasons for me that it helps essentially self-document the methods. And so if I look here at well, first of all, at the doc blocks, I, you know, put them in there. But then if I just come down to the method and I see, okay, this is dependent upon the guide and the user object, where normally, like, even if I'm using, I mean, this is something I'm still trying to figure out, and I'm actually curious what you guys have to think about it, because I'm using the guide and user in multiple spots in this controller, so it makes sense to inject them through the constructor. But to me, it's so clear having the dependencies injected directly through the method that it's worth it for me just to do it directly for each one. And it's so clear to see, okay, the index method is dependent upon guide and user, and the store method is dependent upon, this request, guide, and user. For me, that helps me a lot when I'm working through things. But in as well as so we have our method-specific dependency injection, which also gives us the ability to use these new requests in Laravel 5, these form requests. So if we check in our requests, I have 2 requests that I made. So this one is create guide request. And so you have your 2 methods here, authorize and rules. And so authorization is to check. You can just return true if authorization is, if you don't need to authorize anything for creating this request, or you can actually use this to verify a user, say, owns a style guide if they're trying to update it or something like that. This has actually gotten me into trouble because it comes like this originally, and I spent probably an hour debugging, and I was like, oh wow, I am really not smart, because yeah, I just have to set that, because I was getting 4 or 3s, and I was like, not authorized, what? So don't forget to do that. Learn from my mistakes. But here we have our rules, and so the rules are no different than they were in Laravel 4. So I'm saying the slug is required, alpha dash, this is good for making slugs and things that are going to go in the URL. And then I say that the slug is going to be unique on the guides table in the slug column. And then I set a maximum length of the slug to 100. And then I say title is required and the content is required. So, so the rules are the same as they were, but this whole form request separation is really helpful to kind of separate these concerns, because usually whenever a lot of people would be doing this in Laravel 4, they build a validation class that handles validation, and everyone was always trying to separate it. So I think this does a really good job of doing that. And when we go back to our guide controller, I mean, I'm sure most of you have seen this. When we dependency inject this through the method, this is automatically called and redirected back to the view if there are errors. And we can check the view, which will be, hold on a second. Resources, views, guide, create, yeah. So here I'm using the form builder, which now does not come built into Laravel 5. But I added that, and so I'm using here just to create a label and then text, and then I just have this errors variable, and I just return the first slug, and these names essentially will just always match up if you're using kind of in a group like this. And then you can pass it an HTML structure, and then using :message, essentially your error will be filled into this message and replaced. So another thing to note is that errors is always instantiated in all your views, so you never have to worry about checking if errors exists, which is a nice thing to know. So yeah, that was kind of a quick overview of method dependency injection and form requests. If we go and check out the other one, so we have here, so I have this other one called add privacy user, and this just has one rule, and it's username. I just say it's required, and the username has to be unique on the shares table, which I'm realizing is actually not right. It doesn't have to be unique on the shares table because they could be added to multiple guides. Anyways, so one thing I was kind of had questioned myself was that here we have return true, where I do want to make sure that the person that is making this action of adding a user to a style guide actually owns that style guide. But I already have the middleware from here that checks that the guide or that the user is a guide owner. So I actually didn't need it for this. I probably would have used it if I didn't have that middleware, but since that middleware was used more than just for form requests, I made it into a middleware, and then this just skips authorization. You can also still use the old form of validation in Laravel 5, where you just kind of create the validation object and pass it the rules. People will say that maybe for a short one like this, maybe that's more useful. I still like this way just because it kind of separates the concerns and kind of puts my requests in their own little bucket over here. I think people might have mixed feelings about that, but I think that kind of separating those out for me cleans up my code and keeps things more organized. All right, does anyone have any questions? I heard chat going on, but I can't see that right now. So.
Yeah, I think Osvaldo, you had something, right?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of middlewares, I did use them recently to handle a migration of, to respond with 301 redirects. Basically, the old site, most of the URLs were based on query strings, which was really bad for SEO. So, but all those URLs are indexed by Google, and so the strategy there was to first migrate the categories in the database to a better structure because the old structure was really horrible. And I have in all the rows I have the unique IDs, incremental ID, that standard in the Laravel models, and I also kept all the legacy, all the old IDs. So basically, in the middleware, I quickly first check if somebody the bot is trying to crawl the same URL, or somebody tried to visit that old URL, and I check if the old query string exists, doing requests exist key, and then if it exists, I would try to find the new category and return the slug as the new URL with a 301 response. And it was so simple to do with middlewares. I just made 2 middlewares because the old table structure, the way it was built incorrectly by the previous developer. It forced me to do two checks, one for root categories and another for subcategories, because they used a weird query string for those. So I created just 2 middlewares, very simple, straight to the point, and it just works. It's very, very useful.
Yeah, I mean I've been loving middlewares. They're so much like more robust than just how the filters worked in Laravel 4.
Oh yeah.
they're really, really solid, and it's the way that they work, just with like registering them in the kernel and how they're kind of separated into their own folder. It just is very clean, and for me, it really clicks in my head at how they work. So I've been loving them so far.
I love that, and I think this is something that Taylor did on purpose, is that he made them into this, very easy to remember handler pattern. Is just always handle the method.
Yeah.
And also you know that all the middlewares are going to be executed sequentially, so you can design. You can prioritize what middlewares go first and all that stuff very easily.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're really, really solid. I love them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to go on to attribute casting, which is not talked about a lot, but it's honestly like my favorite feature of Laravel 5. So attribute casting is, so if I go to guides, so here in my guide model, I just create this array and it casts the private column in the database to a Boolean. And so what this does for me is attribute casting the types can be integer, real, float, double, string, Boolean, object, and array. And basically you can just pass it these values, and the model will handle, say if it's an array or object, serializing those into JSON, saving them in the database, and then when you call those from your database, it automatically deserializes those back into the original object or array, and then you can use them just as is. And it's just like, it's a whole nother layer of abstraction up on top of the database. And I'll show you how I use this because it's really, really nice. So what I use this for is I use this for a checkbox, and it's perfect for a checkbox. So if I go into GuideController, so here this is where I'm storing the guide, and what I'm doing is essentially just creating a new guide. I'm just adding a user ID to the array that's being passed into the create. But I don't even need to touch the actual checkbox and say, if checked, then 1 or true, or if not checked, 0 or whatever. I just pass it in, and with attribute casting, with say Boolean, it knows to store that in a database as a 1 or a 0. And then on the other side of it, when I pull it back out, if I go to, where is this going to be? Guide. All here. So here, this is the this page where I just loop through all of your guides and display them in a table. And I need to check if it was not private, or if it was public, I don't need to show this add user access. But if it was private, I need to show this add user access. And so into this view, I just passed in the entire guide object that I pulled out of the database, and then I can just use if guide private, and then show that. So
That's nice.
I never have to do anything besides basically throw it in the database from a form, and when you pull it out, it's in the true PHP Boolean value, which is really, really nice. This is super, super useful for checkboxes, in particular, because that saves me lines, and this is basically the only thing I had to check was if the guide was private, show this.
So how does it
and
store
then,
in the database? Is it storing as like an 1 or
It
0?
stores it, yeah. So you can check here in my guides. Here, the private column, it saves it as a 1 or a 0. And I have this private column set as a Boolean in my schema, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't actually matter as long as it's like a string type or something. It can it's smart enough to know, save it as a 1 or a 0, and then when it pulls it out as a 1 or 0, to convert that to a Boolean, which is really slick. But yeah, I mean, like, you don't even need to know how it saves it. It just does it for you, and it saves a lot of time. So now if I go, let's go to PHP PSR2. So this side navigation part, I was originally, now when I just load this view, I actually just create this on the fly from this markdown. Excuse me. But originally I was actually saving this as an array in the database. And the great part about this was I could just use the attribute casting. I could go to guide, and then here I can just do, I don't know what it was called, content. So I can cast content to an array, and then basically whenever I'm handling, oh wait, sorry, I got rid of it because that was the side navigation. So say it was like side nav or something, pass to an array. So now whenever I'm dealing with this, all I do in my GuideController, if say I was passing it in, I could do this example. Say I was using this way of doing it where I had guide. Oops. I was setting the properties, so I could do side nav equals, and then I can basically just pass it that array, and then I never need to worry about serializing it into JSON or using the PHP serialize function. The model itself handles turning it into JSON, and then when I pull it back out, it'll be back as an array, and I never have to actually touch JSON or anything like that, and it's all handled for me, and I can use it as the standard PHP array, which is very, very neat. Let's see. Does anyone else have any questions or comments in the? I can't see those, but I don't know if anyone said anything.
Nathan asks, do you do custom error responses from your custom requests, or do you do it elsewhere?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, I use those. I didn't know where. I mean, that's where I like to do them inside the custom requests. For to fail gracefully, I guess is the best way to put it. But the override, the forbidden response override, and the regular response override where it gets past an array of errors, is that where you normally, like, if your validation fails inside a custom request, is that where you do it, or do you do it somewhere else?
Sorry, I'm a little bit confused on. You're talking about form requests?
Yeah. This is going back a while. I put it up back when you were talking about
Yeah, it's fine.
request. Yeah, on the custom request, your validation is inside of the custom request. So validation fails. You've got those two helpers there for you. Do you use those, or do you like, if that validation right there fails? How do you prefer to fail gracefully, so to speak, give feedback to the user, or what do you do there?
So I just use how it works standardly in Laravel 5 with so you're asking, so do you know what it does automatically, or is that what you're asking?
Okay, so let me well, you can't really I'm trying to figure out a best place to, like, paste this. I got it right here. at the bottom, like underneath the rules on the custom request. I could paste it here, but I don't know how well this will show up.
Um,
I got that underneath.
Oops.
do you want to just share your screen?
Yeah. I'm new to this, guys. I
Yeah.
apologize.
Go
I'm
for it.
very sorry. Well, it's where do I do that?
Over on the left side, there's a green button. It should be like the second from the
Oh,
top.
screen share. Yeah.
Mhm.
Choose what you like. Entire screen. Okay, you guys see it?
No.
It says you are screen sharing up top.
Yes.
Oh, now I see it.
Okay. So yeah, like right here. So like you got that, and this works pretty well for me. You got that, plus you got the forbidden response up here. I like to do that just because sometimes if I guess to fail gracefully, so to speak, give the user some feedback. Now sometimes like there's no reason that they're probably doing something malicious if they fail validation in certain areas, but certain areas where they can legitimately do the wrong thing, and so you kind of want to gracefully give them feedback, I guess.
Sorry, I'm just reading it.
So what is your main question?
I was just wondering how you guys, or if you guys, because I'm struggling.
Oh, if you do custom messages, is that what you mean?
Custom validation failing messages.
Yeah, so Stuart, how would you handle like validation messages that pop up on your forms?
Gotcha. Yeah, so I haven't used I did in Laravel 4 use the custom validation messages, but I haven't used it with the new form validation requests. Is the public function response, is that a specific method name that is said to be used for that?
Yeah, I think it's set up to where you can override it if you want to. It's part of the original. You can override the custom functions.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think there's also like a public like messages method. You can kind of throw all your custom validation in there, or your custom messages in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's what I was thinking. Because I'm pretty sure you can use the public function messages or something like that, and basically have an array that sets the username or the like name of the form, and then like sets it to a unique message. So like how the rules are set up, but instead of name validation, it's like name and then like custom message.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. And Danny, you might know better than me, but I think that I saw that. I haven't dug too much into it because I usually just use the built-in ones because they've always been good enough for me. But I haven't used in Laravel 5 a full-fledged like production application. So that is obviously needed in some parts. But I mean, what you're doing works. But if what I said is true, then obviously that would probably make things easier.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Thank you.
Yeah. I think that's mostly it for the things I was going to talk about for Laravel 5. Is there anything? Are there any Terry, are there any questions from the site or?
Yeah, we have a couple. So let's see. So Sean asks, what do you think of the Laravel Collective, which you use one of their packages, the form or not form handlers, but the form generators, right? That's how you did the form creation. Since it's not
No, actually, I use the form generation is actually the Laravel package, which is which it was the package that was built into Laravel 4, but then removed for Laravel 5, but you can still include it after.
Yeah, isn't it like from the
Uh,
Laravel Collective though? Let me
oh,
see,
maybe. I'm
Laravel.
not actually totally positive on that now.
So basically, they're asking like the Laravel Collective is a group of people that maintain the things that are pulled out. Like, yeah, here forms and HTML. Here I can pull up. I can show
And
my screen really
annotations,
quick.
maybe?
Somehow I got booted. I think Chrome shut down or something. Can y'all hear me?
Uh-oh.
So I was trying to
Yeah.
share, but anyway, since it didn't work, the Laravel Collective just does the forms in HTML and the route annotations and one other thing. I forgot what it is now, but I mean, my opinion is that I like it. I like that somebody's picking up those pieces that aren't able to be maintained as part of the core because they're helpful for sure. I mean, you use them, Stuart, so I'm sure you find them helpful.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that in general they're good because, some of these things that Taylor has maybe pulled out of Laravel are, they're not necessarily core features, but things that people still obviously love and use. I mean, because I'm using them, but it's nice because it takes some of like the core development off of Taylor's hands and kind of allows him to work on the core Laravel and then kind of distributes some of the other trailings of Laravel. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's important to have some people handling some of the other things. So, well, we have another question.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Actually, hold on. I can show back to Nathan's question. Let me just share my screen real quick. Nathan, they have, this is just on Laravel docs, and they have custom validation errors. And so it looks like you can create this messages variable. I'm not sure how this gets used in the form request. I think it is what Danny was saying, is just public function messages, and then you have the messages array.
That's a lot more laid out. That makes more sense that way. I like that.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely look into that. I'm not sure if it says.
I have a pretty good example on that if you guys want to take a look. Give me a second.
Sure.
All right, so can you guys see my screen now?
Yep.
Sweet. So here I have. So this is my rules where I just set up the basic stuff, and then I have the method rules where I kind of throw that in there and then return them eventually. And then for the authorize, I kind of check. This is like a login type deal, so I just kind of check if their user is valid, and then if it's not, then I kind of return false. And then I have a forbidden response that's kind of custom to that, where it'll redirect them, make sure your login's correct. And then here is like the messages function, or the messages method that I use, where I have a custom validator and it just returns your custom response.
Wait, is this Laravel 5?
Yeah, it's Laravel 5.
Okay, cool.
And so what's also cool is that, like, even here, like, out of the request, you have this user. So like in a lot of my controllers, like I don't even have to reference the user anymore. I just kind of reference request user, and it's already available to me, which has kind of slimmed down my controller a lot. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's great. One thing I've noticed you have, I guess something to mention in Laravel 5 is if you go back to your redirect back,
This one
where
here.
was that? Yeah, one nice thing that I also like in Laravel 5 is all the added functions. So now you can, helper functions. So now you can just do redirect parentheses back, and then, that instead of having to use the facades, which is good because now that you're using PSR4, you don't need to. No, sorry, it's just all lowercase redirect, and then
It's a helper function, right?
yeah.
I can't type.
Yeah, so it's just lowercase redirect, parentheses, and then your little arrow,
Okay,
method calling arrow.
just like that, right?
No, actually,
I
yeah,
think
but
you
they just
need
need
parentheses after the T, though.
after back and redirect.
That's
Yeah.
pretty sweet.
Yeah, because it's nice because, in Laravel 4, it was fine to just use a facade for that, but now that they're using PSR4, it's now that you have to you have to import the redirect and all these other things. It's easy, it's nice to just use the helper functions. You can also there's a helper function for view, redirect, and they're just convenient.
That's pretty sweet.
So we have another question here from Suresh. So he says, I have a form which is used to sign up different types of users. So I guess different types of users will sign up and register using the same form. So there's a contractor, an agent, a seeker, and anyways, basically these different types of users. Suresh is only using one form request to validate the form. I am right now able to do it, but he wanted to know if there's like a best practice that we think for how to validate different users. Any thoughts?
So he's validating different users, or he's
Yeah, I think
creating
we'd have to
different
have more
users?
context because we'd have to know if are they landing on different routes? So it's like let's say it's whatever acme.com/register/contractor and then /register/agent, and maybe he's just injecting like a partial view that only has the form in it or something, or if the form has like radio buttons where they just select, hey, I want to register as an agent, or maybe they can be a part of several groups. I can't think of it. Like, it seems like there's maybe a lot of different ways
Yeah.
to do it. So
Yeah, I was gonna say if it was like one where they're actually selecting which person they are, or which person they are, they could you could use the in validation, which essentially do in colon, and then you comma separated strings, basically whatever the three different ones are, and basically that checks and makes sure that that value is in that list of values.
what are you sharing?
Yeah, I bet.
You share the responses from the docs?
Yeah, I was just sending the link to what he was talking about earlier with the lowercase redirect. It's right there. I was just putting that for reference.
Cool. Yeah, so Suresh, there's probably a lot of ways that you could handle it. So he also has a
Yeah, I'm a little confused on the
question.
context of that.
Yeah, he built an eloquent query based off of the form fields. The form has 5 fields, and the user opted only 3 fields. and now the query must accommodate the same. So, I mean, I guess if you have a form that's using Eloquent, I mean, it depends on if you want them to save all 5 fields. Yeah, sorry we're not more helpful. It's
Yeah, and I mean, you could. It depends if those fields have to be searchable.
exactly.
Then you'd obviously need them in columns, but you could also just be, like I said before, using attribute casting, save that as an array. But I don't know with the exact way that they're using it if that would help them.
Right. So
I'm not sure
another
if that.
question from not Suresh. Let's see. It's from Kobe. So he said he's hearing a lot of rumblings in building apps with both Laravel and React. Does Laravel 5 address this trend at all? I know that we've been looking into React. I actually forwarded this to a friend, Andrew. He works with us at MusicBed, and I mean we've been really looking at it a lot because we're currently using Angular, and I think it could be a good option. Have any of you guys checked out React at all?
I haven't touched React. I know there's I think Jeffrey Way was doing some Lyricasts on React, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't checked out anything React. I haven't spent much time on the JavaScript side recently.
Sure.
But I know that there's. Well, I'm not totally sure how React works because I haven't used it, but obviously there are conveniences that were added in Laravel 5 with Elixir, and I was using Elixir in my in that project for just compiling CSS, and I think that I don't think there's support for it now, but I think that Laravel is being more tightly coupled with the front end as we see it progress. So hopefully, things like this are going to become closer and be made easier to interact with.
Yeah, I think so for sure. I think everything's getting way easier to combine and use different pieces for whatever it is that you're needing. So
Yeah, I think Elixir is like a good. I mean, I don't know how I'd do it any differently. I think it's a really good step in the right direction because if you think back to Laravel 4, we didn't really have. There's a very big separation between our back end and our front end, and now the back end's maybe helping out a little bit, but I think that as the farther we go on, they'll become closer.
yeah, for sure. Well, Stuart, do you have anything you want to say to wrap up?
Um,
Have you enjoyed
Nothing
it?
specifically, no. If anyone has any more questions, they can tweet at me and I can answer them as best I can, I
I
guess.
guess I
But
have a question. How have you enjoyed getting into Laravel 5 as opposed to 4?
yes, definitely. I think that the edges of it have been constantly been smoothed out, and I know not to jump ahead to 5.1, but things they're constantly even just changing. I know in 5.1 they're changing the commands folder to jobs to better represent what it is commands and that folder should be used for. And I think it's just that attention to detail that is constantly making it better and easier to work with. For example, the middlewares in Laravel 5 as opposed to the filters in Laravel 4. The middlewares, the filters and the middlewares didn't have. There's a lot of differences, but in a lot of ways they're still doing the same thing, but the way that it is laid out in Laravel 5 is, I think, easier to understand. At first, people are like, now I have to use like objects or classes instead of just these little functions, and I have to like use a an artisan command to make one, but you realize once you actually get down to it, it just makes it so much easier. And even just with the folder structure, which I didn't even go over much or at all in Laravel 5, is it just feels very very fluid to work with, and kind of now that the whole app folder is PSR forward, it makes it so easy to fly around there and connect up objects and work. So I've loved Laravel 5 so far.
Danny, do you have any thoughts
What
on
do you
that?
think, Osvaldo?
I love it for sure.
I also love Laravel 5. Yeah, much more, Dad.
What's the biggest thing that you've liked about it? I guess you keep saying form request, right?
I really like just form requests and just the middleware and form request stuff. I like the fact that it just cleans up the controller so much. It's stuff where in Laravel 4 I would have maybe 6 to 10 lines, in the controller. I can almost do in one line now in Laravel 5 just because I moved that and extracted out to the middleware and form requests. It's really awesome. And I've always kind of dreaded validation, even just regular PHP. I was like, oh, I hate validating stuff, and it's like it was always like a second thought. Now it's like it's so easy to do. It's easy to provide response messages as to what the user did wrong. It's why not do it? It's awesome.
Yeah, the actual validation checks in Laravel 4 are the same they are in Laravel 5, and those are always really solid. But then it was always like a question of like, where do I use this? Like, how does this fit into my controller application? And now it just, having those defaults of where things should go, maybe if you want to break out into something else, you might cause a little more work, but for the majority of people, it sets them up for success a lot faster, which is great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm excited about what's ahead. Well, cool. Well, I guess I don't have any more questions. So I guess with that being said, we can wrap up this meeting. So if you have any questions, if you're watching this online or watching this later, feel free to tweet at Laravel DFW. And I guess, Stuart, tell us where they can hear more about you. I guess Stu Yam on Twitter. And is there any other websites they can check out for more stuff from you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my Twitter is kind of just my homepage for now. So I'm at Stuyam, Stuyam on Twitter, and I should probably show this because people can't actually know my last name. But, oops. I'm at Yamartino on GitHub and Stack Overflow or whatever. And yeah, you can tweet at me or pull request my code.
Yeah, when do you think Code
And
Stylus will launch?
probably in like a week or two. Like the semester is kind of wrapping up, so I've been really busy with school and trying to figure out this as well. So it should be up soon, and I'll probably have a tweet about it or something. And I don't know if it'll be useful to anyone, but it kind of just is a fun little interesting Laravel 5 project.
Yep. Well, very cool. Well, with that being said, it's actually dark in the room that I'm in, so otherwise I'd turn on my video, but I guess we'll have a photo goodbye today. But thank you all for watching. Feel free, again, to look us up on meetup.com, look us up on Twitter, Laravel DFW. All of that information is on laraveldfw.com. So thanks for joining us. Danny, Osvaldo, Nathan, thanks for sitting in with us. So, yeah, signing off. We'll talk to you guys next month.